Oh, is that the question you want to know on that?
Yep.
I was born in Pincher Creek, 1918, the 1st of October.
Wow.
Now that little place was across the creek from where the hospital is. Well, the hospital is across the creek now, but there was a little shack there where they went for that for a little. And that was back in 1918. At that time, we were living in the Porcupine Hills at a homestead up there. A log shack, about 10 by 18, something like that. And, well, that was all horse and buggy days in them days. From there, we moved to what they call Goose Lake on south of Pincher, about 20 miles, somewhere in there. My dad and my mother were farmers, small-time farmers, to what they are today. And from there on, we moved to what they call the Jimmy Wood place. We lived there till I was about 4 years old, 5 years old. And that is just a few miles west of where we are right now. And then we moved down onto the Fishburne Creek and the old Shapu place. And we're still here. That was about in 1924 or 1925 when we moved here. And that's where I started school here. We went to school on Saddle Horse. Well, and as went, eventually we moved to the Yarrow District for a year or two when I went to school there. Well, I went to school to grade 8, that was it, as far as I went. After that, we went to farming. And then in 1942, early part of the spring of 42, Jack Jenkins stopped in and said, let's go to Calgary and join the Army. So we had somebody drive us into town, got on a bus and went to Calgary, joined the Army. His number is either one lower or one higher than me. And my number is M315, somewhere in there. It's been a long time ago. We took basic training in Curry Barracks. And I decided that I would be in the service corps. And I was driving trucks and one thing another. And after that was done, we were shipped down to Brandon, Manitoba, where we took more training. And somewhere along the line, they took me out to have a driver's test in a truck. And somewhere, I don't know what took place, when we got back to camp, they said, well, I think we need you in the artillery. I don't think they liked my truck driving business. So I was then in the artillery, and we learned how to operate these 25-pounders. This went on for a month or so, about a month, I guess. Then there was a draft called, and we were all to report down to the drill hall with all our packs. We were leaving. And when all the names were called out, there was, I think, 6 of us left standing. So we were going to stay there. So I don't know what happened or why. Anyway, next morning there's a sign on the bulletin board said wanted miners, trappers, bushmen, ranchers, farmers for a special unit. So the 6 of us joined up. And they shipped us out to back to Calgary for an interview. And I think we all passed. I did, I know. They asked a few questions. One was, can you kill a man? And I said, how in hell would I know? He said, you're in, you're away, you head her down there. And they put us on a train and we headed out. We had no idea where we were going, but the train was going south, so we figured we were maybe going to Fort Benning. But then they made a turn somewhere down around right by the border. Then we had no idea where we were going, and we wound up in Helena, Montana. And from there, we were divided into, there was a tent city there at the time, and we were designated to certain tents. And in the tent I was in, there was one fellow there from Butte, Montana, and the other guy was from, forget the name of the dang town. He was down from, in California, San Jose, California. And that is where we got our start in the 1st Special Service Force. That is when we started our training. And we were strictly on double time, and we trained hard for quite a long time. I have pictures here of the training that we took somewhere along the line here.
How old were you when you went to Calgary to join with Jack Jenkins?
I was 21 years old.
And so you finished school and you were grade 8 and you helped around the farm. You developed an interest in the outdoors, fishing or hunting, or both. And is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, I trapped, whatever. And we were always fishing or doing something to the outside. Yeah.
So you knew how to handle a gun, and
yes. We were very good shots with rifles and .22s.
And you were comfortable in the outdoors.
And comfortable outdoors.
Was there
camping and whatever?
A highlight for you, just when you were growing up, what were some of as a teenager, what were some of your most memorable events in the outdoors?
I would imagine deer hunting back up in the hills. And also, I would say trapping beaver along the creeks here. That is the only money we had, was what we could get out of the furs that we could trap.
And what did your mom and dad think when you were going to enlist in the military?
When I went to enlist, my mother was already dead.
Oh.
My mother had died in 1937. Dad didn't say a dang thing. I don't think he even knew I was going to enlist. Probably did, but he didn't say anything.
Did Jack Jenkins' parents did anybody give you advice on whether this was a good idea or a bad idea, or was it completely independent?
No, there was a little, he had to have permission from his mother to join. Me, I'm 21, but at 21 there was a draft on me. So it was either join or be drafted, one or the other. So anybody back in them days knows dang well that if you stuck around after 21, you were going to get drafted. So you may as well join, because you're going to go in the Army anyway.
And when you joined, was World War II was by then underway?
Yeah.
And what sort of, what had you read about the war? What sort of ideas did you have when you first joined? What were you, aside from knowing you'd likely be drafted anyway, did you have any sense of what you were thinking you were getting into, or?
No, didn't have no idea what was going on over there. I don't think there was much on the radio about it, or in the papers. There was some all right, but yeah, well, we had a radio all right, and a television. At least I think we did. No, we didn't have a television. No, there was no way. We did have a radio, I think.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we can think much about what was going on over there. We knew there was a war on, and you were going to get in it, one way or another.
So I'm going to go back to Helena. When you arrived at Helena, and it's a tent city, how many men would there have been in that tent city?
Hmm?
How many people would have been in the tent city? How many people were recruited to join?
Well,
the
they were
first Special
coming in
Service?
from all over Canada and all over the U.S. Now, it was quite a surprise to us as Canadians. We'd never seen any of the, what do they call the people on horseback? The
Cavalry?
The cavalry. They had a different uniform on. And then, of course, the Scottish Highlanders, they come in with their kilts on. That made the Americans look kind of, take a look at that little procedure.
And these were Canadians with
And
the
that,
kilts.
And there was sailors and airmen and whatever joined. And there was, most of them were off the ranches, but then there was some bad actors in our outfit also. They didn't all stay there that long.
So they even still were sorting people out that they didn't think quite measured up for the first Special Service Force. And so if you didn't cut it, you were sent home.
No. Well, they just put us in a tent there, and you met a couple of Americans, and whether you got along with them or not, well, you did, eh?
But if you weren't tough enough, you might be sent home.
If you didn't stand up to any of it, if you didn't jump out of the plane or rappel down the cliffs, or couldn't stand the hikes, or couldn't stand the cold, you were sent home. You had to maneuver to their specifications. You also had to learn to take orders from an American, not just a Canadian.
And
Now, that didn't pose no trouble after the first couple of months, because then we were all dressed in the same American uniform. And outside of the dialect, it was very hard to tell who was who.
And how long were you stationed in Helena?
We went down there in 1942. Oh, we were there about a year. Very close to that, anyway. We went there in July, and then we skied that winter. And then we were sent down to Norfolk, Virginia for amphibious training. And we took that, and then we were sent over to Burlington, Vermont for more training. And from there we came by train along the East Coast to New York City. No, that is wrong. We didn't do that. We came back to Helena. And we came back to Fort Stoneman and San Francisco Bay. And we were stationed on Angel Island for about a week. And that is where we got winter clothes. And we figured that from there we were going to, our original object was to go into Norway and blow up the heavy water plants in Norway, and we were supposed to parachute into there. But that was dropped. And after we got back to Helena from Burlington, Vermont, back down to San Francisco in the Bay of San Francisco, and we were on Angel Island for about a week. With our field glasses, we could watch the prisoners on Alcatraz. We watched them for a while. And then we were put on the Kaiser's Liberty ships, and we sailed up along the west coast to the Aleutian Islands. And that was a trip of about 2 weeks out there along the west coast. That was a huge convoy going up there. And up there we landed on the island of Amchitka, and that was a camp. But there was nobody there, nothing there but muskeg and fog and rain. And that was a camp up there. We did more training up there. We walked around them islands, and we also did a little fishing while we were there. We had some gear there. We'd go catch these rock cod out there on the beach. And then we were put aboard the anti-tank ships there. But when they didn't have no tanks on them, just us on there. And then we were landed on the east side of Kiska Island. And we were putting rubber boats around midnight, and we paddled into East Kiska Lake, paddled across it. We get about in the middle of it, the moon came out, and that's about the first time in a month we had seen the moon. And it was bright. We could see for miles. And there was supposed to be Japs. So we just kept paddling and wondering when the machine guns were going to start. But they didn't. And we landed on the base of the mountain. And we eventually hit onto the top, and there was an artillery piece up there, probably 25-pounder or something of that nature, a Japanese gun. And some of my guys said, well, we should turn that and turn it back, face inland. And I said, no, don't do that, don't touch it. And we didn't. But the ones that took over after we left, they did turn it, and it blew up. There was a booby trap underneath it. So we were up there 2 or 3 days, not too long. It was cold and wet and miserable, and it was not good. And then they took us back down to Kiska Harbor, and we loaded on a ship and headed back to Camp Stoneman. And then we were given a 10-day leave to report back to Burlington, Vermont. So me and my buddy out of Medicine Hat, we got on the train and headed north along the coast, Vancouver. We parted in Calgary, and I came home for a while. And then I went and we got back to Calgary, and then we caught the train and headed east to Burlington. And from there, we did more training. But somewhere along the line, we must have went from Burlington. Where the heck did we go to? Oh, from Burlington, we went by train down to New York City. And we boarded the Empress of Japan there. And we sailed for North Africa to Casablanca. That was just one ship. There wasn't a convoy. It was just a single ship. I think she traveled at about 24 knots. So they could outrun the submarines, they said. So we were on 2 or 3 ships there, and they were fast ships. And we landed in Casablanca. And we were put in a compound there for a spell. Then we were loaded on trains, and we went to the port of Oran. And that is where we got on the Ile-de-France and headed for Italy. And that's where we landed, is in Naples. when we got off that ship, we were taken out to the, gets a little fuzzy from there on in. But I know we were put in different camps along the way, and then they decided on taking us, that is when they got the call that they needed to be taken to La Defensa. And we were camped in what they call Santa Maria. And we were taken out to La Defensa, and we camped on the side of the mountain there overnight. And the 2nd Regiment during the night had climbed up pretty well close to the top, and about daylight they attacked and took that mountain over in about, I think they said 4 hours. They had the Germans cleared off of La Defensa. And I was in the 3rd Regiment. We did go up on top, and we had to bring up supplies for the 2nd Regiment, bring down the wounded, and supply them with ammunition, grub, and water. I think we made 2 or 3 trips. It was about a 10-mile round trip, and I think we made 3 trips up a day. That went on for quite a while. After, I don't know just exactly how long we were up there. Must have been up there for 10 or 15 days, something like that. And the mountains next to it were cleared. Now that changed the course of the war in Italy. That opened the gaps so the armies and the tanks and the other armies could come through onto the flats, out into flat ground in Italy, and head for Rome. Now there was quite a lot of other mountains that we were on, but I don't know all the names of them. I forget all them names that were on them. But we spent months up in their mountains, up in through there. And we were eventually taken back down. And then there was a call come in to Mark Radcliffe and said to take the 3rd Regiment and head her for Rome. And that's what we did. We bypassed a lot of enemy, and we eventually hit Rome, and we were the first troops into Rome, the very first troops. It might have been a scout, or 1 or 2 of our scouts had been in ahead of us, but we were the first troops into that. Ticked off the British and the Canadians. So we had built ourselves quite a reputation by that time. From there on, we went to very different places, and then we went down to where the 3rd Regiment took over the Mount Mayo. That was we lost a lot of men on that one also, but we took it and we held it. And there was, I think the Germans made, 10 or 12 counterattacks trying to get back up there. Both my guys were killed there alongside of me, right on the way up. The most first machine gun, he was right alongside of me. He was the one that had the Johnson automatic rifle, had a 30 caliber clip on it, and he was shot. The machine gun fire got him through the head there, through the helmet. And I can still hear them things ticking through that helmet because he was standing right alongside of me. So then I was sent back to pick up that Johnson rifle, which I did, and I got it. And then I tied in with a guy from San Francisco, a guy by the name of Kurt Soll. And we were stationed watching down into a valley. down in that valley, they set up a machine gun, and there was machine gun bullets coming off them rocks between, just in front where we were laying, me and Kurtzall. There was also a sniper along on our left side that took a shot at us. The bullet went over top of me and went to Kurtzall's butt. He had 4 holes in him, but it didn't hit the spine. It went through the, and he stayed there till morning with me. And when this other machine gun opened up down below there, I eventually got this Johnson lined up on him, and that settled that one down. And then they tried to crawl up on us, and we would throw the hand grenades down, and we could hear them moaning and groaning down in there, but that didn't bother us any. In the morning, well after daylight, I was relieved by somebody else. I was so stiff and cold, I had to damn near crawl down to where they were below, kind of down in a secluded spot. And we were up there for, I don't know, quite a long time, 10 to 12 days, 15 to 20 days, and we stayed there. And then when we were relieved by the, I think it was the Sinhalese or something, they were dark Africans. And at the time we had some prisoners with me, half a dozen. And these Sinhalese says he couldn't talk English, but he pointed to those prisoners and he said to him, and then he pointed to his knife and he said this, you'd take them out behind and cut their throat. I said, no, I'm taking them down. I need them to pack my packs down over the mountain. You can't have them. But they would have eliminated them. And then, well, we would have a few weeks rest, or not very long, and we would move on to another project. And from there, eventually, we moved on to the Anzio beachhead. Now, we were only at about half strength at that time. There was not very many men left, and we were spread out on that Anzio beach, and it wasn't very big. But we had over, I think, 2/3 of the beachhead that we patrolled. But the ones that were there before, the enemy was right up close. You could almost spit on them. But we made lots of patrols and kept pushing them back till they finally got to be a mile away. But we would patrol every night. That went on. And we sat on that beachhead for 90 days in our foxholes, through the rain and whatever else. And from there, when they decided that we would pull out for Rome. Now, I get these stories mixed up every once in a while, but it was after that that we pulled out of there and we're heading to the Lyre Valley. And in that Lyre Valley, we're somewhere down in there, we were sitting under a big old tree there. I think it was a cherry tree. We were all sitting around there, and we all of a sudden heard a hard bang. And then one guy said, I've been hit. And I seen something roll down from his helmet down the front here, and it was a 30 caliber or 20 caliber bullet. And then I seen some blood running down the side of his head. Now that had hit his helmet, but it didn't go through, but it broke the inside of that, and it was that shrapnel from the inside of that helmet that cut his side of his head. Now that is a close call, I would say. But long before that, when we come back out, when we first went out of Anzio, when we first push. We lost. We got cut off, and the San Marco Marines had us cut off there, and we were supposed to have troops on our left flank, but we didn't. The enemy was on our left flank, and we got down there, and then we were under machine gun fire all the way back to our bridgehead. I was under machine gun fire, heavy machine gun fire. In fact, my buddy from California told the colonel up there that I had got killed. He seen me go down. But no, I wasn't killed. I was being flat on the ground there. By that night there, out of 30 men that went down to this objective where we were supposed to go, there was only 10 of us left that were fit to travel the next day. And we did. We moved out and headed her out. But the Germans at that time, well, those were the San Marco Marines, and the Germans that were vacating around that time. So that's when we got into the Lear Valley. Now, one of the guys in there, I think his name was Biblowitz, we were sitting around the campfire there. He said, you know, I have a very bad feeling about this Lear Valley. And sure enough, he didn't get very far in it till he was killed. Why did he have a bad feeling? Something seemed to tell him that it wasn't good. But anyway, we went on through that, and then where the hell did we go from there? We went somewhere. Then I think we went into southern France. And we were through quite a bit of southern France. We eventually wound up in the city of Nice, which was a beautiful city. We camped in a big, quite a house, quite a palace there, actually. It wasn't, we were there for quite a while, but it was a great place. There were lots of girls there, I'll tell you, wherever. They had one of these big carousels there, and went down there was flocks of girls there. Great place to be. And anyway, I got a call that I was to bring my platoon out and line them up, and then have the front row take a step forward and the back row to take a step backwards, and to have them stand at attention, because they were going to be inspected. And yeah, there was a captain came out, and the colonel, and they had a civilian along and his daughter. Somebody in one of the, she had got raped, and they kind of thought they were inspecting all the troops. So they went through there, and she did not point to anybody in my platoon. So you had to be a little careful what you performed over there, because there was no reason for that procedure. That makes you a little bit worried some. But it all turned out okay. The only little experience I found out that this here parachute sign meant a lot. I had a girl there, and we went to a dance there. And somewhere on the, or whether she was dancing with me, or anyway, this Canadian soldier come over and grabbed her and took her away, I think while we were dancing. He was a real smart ass. And he only went a short ways, and then he dropped her. And she came back, and I asked her, why did he drop you? She said, he looked at that parachute wings that what I had pinned on her breast. She said, and he dropped her, he dropped her, and he left. So we had great respect. They respected the paratroopers. The only person that didn't was the military police. They hated paratroopers. I found that out when I got back to Calgary after the war. He did not like Canadian paratroopers or any paratroopers. I guess maybe they worked him over a little. I'm not too sure. He didn't say why, but he sure did hate them. It wasn't too long after that we were at Villeneuve-le-Bête. We were lined up there, and that is when the outfit was broke up. The order came down for the Canadians. How did this work? The Canadians in the front line to take a step forward and make a left turn and marched the Canadians out. Now, you didn't know who was going to be walking out at all. You had no idea which one was which. You had an idea, all right, of the guys you were with, but in the different companies. And from there, the Americans went back into action. My buddy, they went on back into the Belgian Bulge and fought more. But we were put on, the Canadians were put on ships and sent to England. And while we were on board that ship, them cooks, they cooked up a hassle of what everybody knows as tripe. You know what tripe is?
I've forgotten.
Anyway, it's the stomach of a cow all cut up in little strips. And a lot of our guys did not know what in the hell that was, and they asked around. Oh, I said, I know what it is. It's tripe. Now, what in the hell is tripe? I said, it's cow's gut. Holy hell, did I cause an awful stir. I think they were about to hang that cook. Feed us cow guts. Well, they certainly must have had something better than that on that stupid ship. And anyway, when we got back to England, we found out that we were not very well liked, especially the Americans. We still had American uniforms on, and they did not, the women especially, they hated the Americans. I found that out in the first bar I went in. You ordered a beer, or yeah, it was mild and bitters or something. And when she come over, she seen we were American uniforms. She said, I have a dang good notion to just dump this whole tray of beer over your head. I said, lady, you better have one more look and see that patch on my shoulder. Doesn't that say Canada? Oh, she said, you're Canadian? And they did not like Americans. I guess the Americans were over there. Why? As far as I know, the Canadians over there were up to no good either, believe me. There was lots of heartbroken women over there. They'd just shack up with them and leave. And some of them started a family over there. Some of the Canadians were over for dang near 4 years before they went overseas. Which makes me wonder every once in a while. We were in Italy for about dang near a year and a half before the Canadians came over in there. We had done a lot of fighting before what was that landing they made there? Dieppe? No, that was a bad one. That wasn't it.
D-Day?
D-Day. Mm-hmm. And so then when we got back to England, that is where they wanted to know what you were going to do or where. So I joined the 1st Canadian Para-Battalions and signed up to go to Japan, which didn't materialize by the time I got back. And was here a little while, and then the war was over there in Japan. So when we first come into Rome, our job was to make sure that the bridges across the Tiber River were not blown up. Now our outfit, well, not the 3rd Regiment, we had our bridges there, but I think we held 7 bridges across that Tiber River in different spots, see. And as we were on there, my platoon there, we were on one bridge, and the road off to our left was where the German soldiers were coming back from leave and going to join their outfit. They didn't know that we were on that. And we would put a stream of machine guns in front of every car or truck that went by there, and they would stop, and we would pick them soldiers out of there. We took a lot of prisoners there. And 2 young fellows came through there on a kind of a fancy little open car there, and they did stop, but they got out and run. And me and Jim Kurtzall, we went after them, and we see them throw their pistols in the little creek there, and we hollered at them to stop, but they did not stop. Them two, they kept running. So we both shot at them. Now one guy got hit. The bullet went through right here and took about 4 lower teeth out, 2 on each side, and went through. They did stop then. So we made them take this back to where they'd throw them guns out, and pick them guns out and give it to us. Them two were, I wouldn't say 18, 19 years old, very young, could speak good English. And the one guy that didn't get shot eventually got a little more brave. He wanted to know what we were going to do with them, whether they were going to get shot. They had heard that the special forces would shoot them. I said, no, we're not going to shoot you. We're going to take you back to headquarters, and you'd probably go to a prison camp, I don't know. And then he got a little more bold. He said, could I stop at the car and pick up a picture of my girlfriend on the way? I said, yeah. I said, oh, yeah, you can pick up a girlfriend or anything else you need out of there, like anything for your shave or whatever. But make damn sure I can see your hands while you're ruffling around in here. And we took him over there, and he got his pictures of his girlfriend, and we turned them into headquarters there. But we took a lot of prisoners there. And while this was going on, there was one of our tanks, Sherman, was coming across the bridge. And I was there, one of them, we went over and told him to be careful. On the other side of that bridge is a German Tiger tank. Well, that damn tanker, he just turned that thing around and went back to where he come from. So we didn't tell anybody else what was over there. We let him go. We didn't want to mess with that Tiger tank. He did get a few of ours outfit too. And after that, we were through with that little procedure. We had a few days off to tour Rome, and we got to tour the Vatican. Then the Swiss guides took us all through that big church there, the Vatican. That was quite a, I think we're going to go through that again on our trip back to Italy in June. But it was quite an experience to be in that big church. That is the biggest church, Catholic church there is. None others can be any bigger than that. was, they also showed us in the big, if you know what it is, the big dome above there, they showed us where the artist Raphael, if you ever studied about him, an old time artist, hundreds of years ago, or I don't know how many, a long time ago, and he painted that on his back. He was laying on a platform on his back and painted this picture on that dome up there, which is quite a sight.
It's the Sistine Chapel, I believe, isn't it?
You know, they didn't teach you anything about them old-time artists. They did us when we went to school.
I think it's the Sistine Chapel, I believe you're talking about. Isn't it called the Sistine Chapel? I think that's it. I've seen it, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I just don't know the names of the artists and whatnot. But
No, we learned all about them old-time artists that were, for some reason or other, I don't know why we had to know about them.
Henry, I remember you telling me a story once. I think I asked a question about what was one of your toughest experiences, and you told me a story about paddling down the Rhine River at night in a canoe and your buddy had been shot. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, very well.
What happened?
That was my buddy that I traveled with, Barney Barnhill. He was from the ranch out of Kansas. And this was on the Anzio beachhead over there. Now he was off to my left there. Him and I think it was old Piccolomini. And a mortar shell came in and hit the treetop, and the shrapnel hit Barney and killed him there. And I got a call there, this was in the middle of the night sometime, saying to go and get Barney and take him down to headquarters. And went over there and wrapped him in a blanket and put him on that river boat and floated him down to headquarters. Yeah, it was a very sad night for me. It was a very moonlight night also. It was a very sad day, because him and I had traveled together a lot. But those are the things you had to put up with.
How many men were in the 3rd Regiment?
How many men in the 3rd Regiment? There was 3 companies. There was 90 men in each company.
And what was...
There was 1,900 men altogether in all 3 regiments, 1,900. Half Canadians, half Americans.
You had basic training in Manitoba, and
Basic
then...
training in Brandon, Manitoba, yeah.
And what was the difference between your basic training and then the training that you had in preparing for the Special Service Forces?
Well, in the Special Service Force, we trained for a lot of tough training. We also trained we learned to ski, we learned demolition, we learned hand-to-hand combat. We made long hikes. We had a lot of calisthenics. I mean, they made you tough. And all performances were done on double time. When you went to the mess hall, it was on double time.
I noticed...
Skiing was tough and cold. We skied in Blossburg at 40 below. You better be tough. You were on there. I got a poem here that a friend of mine wrote. Tells you all about that.
I noticed in some of the pictures that there's one picture where faces are being painted black to, I expect, to help prepare for going behind enemy lines. Were you trained to do that?
That was done on the, you went out on parade all night. And that is where we got the name, the Devil's Brigade. Guys with the black faces and baggy pants. That was on Anzio. Yeah, I got pictures of it there with their faces all black, yeah.
So you were on Anzio Beach for, you said 90 days, about 3 months, and you were in foxholes.
Yeah.
And at nighttime you would emerge and go behind enemy lines to try and push them back? Is that what was happening?
That's what was happening. We went right down to enemy lines down there. And every so often, the outfit that was in reserve, like the 2nd Regiment, they would put a big patrol in, take tanks down there and pick up prisoners for interrogation. One of our officers was captured, Lieutenant Radcliffe, and they kind of worked him over pretty good. But somewhere along the line, now Tommy Prince had something to do with this little procedure. He was out there and he called in artillery fire onto this area where Radcliffe was. And that's where Radcliffe sneaked out. The guards went and hid somewhere in a foxhole or something, and Radcliffe sneaked out under this artillery fire and come back to the front line.
So you would you have gone out every night, or how often would you have gone out?
Patrols went out every night, all night.
And what was your most memorable experience when you were out in one of these patrols from the beach?
Well, I was out there one night and I forgot the password, and another patrol challenged us. And I said, "Yeah, damn it, I have forgot this password, but don't you ever dare shoot at us because we got you covered." And he said, "Damn it, is that you, Planger?" Some of the other boys had different experiences.
So would you have been the only person that had the password because you were a leader of that group, or?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, the other guys were supposed to have it too. And then I think I got a picture somewhere here of a little fella. That was captured, but we were out on patrol all night. And when we came in, I guess we did not check what was following behind us. And when we got through the concertina wire, and we usually always got down on the other side of and built fire, and I look up and here's a soldier standing there, a German soldier. He's just a little fella. I don't think he weighed 100 pounds. And he put his hands up and said, "Me Polish, me Polish." So I brought him that we had made a goof there. We did not hear him following behind us. And another time when we came in, there was a recruit, a guy that had just, I don't know, he wasn't an original, but he was pretty nervous. And we come in, it's still dark, and all of a sudden I see a streak of light flashing above us, and I hollered "grenade," and we all got down, and this grenade exploded. And this guy had thrown a grenade. He didn't say nothing or didn't shout nothing, he just threw a grenade at us. And then one fella, one of my guys was pretty upset over this. He said, he gave him a hell of a bawling out. And he said, "Now look what you did." He said, "You threw the grenade, you didn't kill anybody, you'd have been a dead bastard." You better smarten up while you do this. But there was all kinds of things.
Henry, so the second, you were in the 3rd Regiment was yours,
Yeah.
and the 2nd Regiment was the regiment that emerged on top of Mount La Defensa. So they climbed all evening, did they, to emerge on top of Mount La Defensa in the morning and take on the German forces first thing in the morning? Is that what happened?
Buried just at daylight, yeah. And we went up that night.
How many German forces do you think were on Mount La Defensa?
I haven't a clue.
Many prisoners were taken?
Hmm?
Were many prisoners taken?
I don't remember any prisoners coming down off that hill.
When you...
Let's just have you dab up a little bit there. Yep, down in here.
Yeah.
You got her. Oh, a little bit down further. And you got it. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt, but
That's fine.
I need to do that.
When you went up, did you have an opportunity to look around Mount La Defensa? Or it was just a matter of get up there, drop your supplies, and get
Just
back
go
down?
up there, yeah. Oh, we were up there, we looked around there, well, I'm not too sure, because I got a picture of the people buried there. Maybe 30 of our soldiers buried up there, and just their toes of their boots sticking out. It's a very sad affair. But while they were up there doing this, the first regiment, now a German soldier came out with his hands up, and was one of our Canadian colonels was talking to him, and all of a sudden that German reached down and took his pistol out and shot that Canadian. And I think that is where no more prisoners came off that hill. I'm pretty sure.
How,
We packed, I'm sure we never took any prisoners off that hill that I know of, unless somebody walked them down. I don't know. They might have.
you were packing supplies up. How much weight would you have been carrying when you were packing up supplies?
At least 80 pounds, around 80 pounds. You know what a 5-gallon or a jerry can of water would weigh? That's around 60, 70 pounds. And that buddy of mine said we made 3 trips. We'll make 30 miles. I thought we made 2, but it was a good long pack anyway.
Each day?
Every day. Sometimes twice a day, 3 times a day.
So did you ever personally have to engage in hand-to-hand combat when you were behind enemy lines or anything?
No. We did put our bayonets on once or whatever we had, but we didn't. No.
Did you,
Can we just have you put your napkin down? Sorry to interrupt you again. I can just hear it on the earphones a little bit. Sorry to be a pain. Thanks.
so the Lear Valley, when you talked about, Henry, when your friend was shot through the back, and the two of you it was just the 2 of you together?
No, there was about 5 of us sitting underneath that tree.
And
Cherry tree.
well, this is when you were the sniper shot your friend, right? I'm not talking about the incident where the bullet went through the helmet, but where you were pinned down on the top of a ridge, and there was German forces trying to get up on you fellows, and you threw grenades over, and you had to stay up there all night. You got really cold. How many men were with you then?
Probably around 30 men up here.
And do you have any idea of how many German forces were trying to get up and get after you guys?
No idea. No. I know there was a machine gunner down there, and after I opened up on it, there was no more fire coming our way. But it was a few minutes later, one of the Germans run up to where that machine gun was and picked it up, and I didn't have time enough to get on him, and he got out of sight.
You mentioned Tommy Prince, who is a First Nations fellow that you knew from the Special Service Forces. He was
a friend of mine, yeah.
He was a Canadian. Where was he from, and what were your, what memories do you have of working with him?
Was always with Colonel Gilday. Now, he was his personal scout. Now, he was never with us. He was in our company, but he was always out on his own. Tommy Prince told Colonel Gilday, when he asked him, why don't you want to go out with the platoon or the companies or patrols with the other soldiers? He said, well, those white men make too damn much noise. He had to go out by himself. So Gilday used to send him out. He used to go back out there, and he would stay out there all day and all night and direct artillery fire is what he did mostly. Because I don't remember him with us on any, but he was always with Gilday.
I remember you mentioning a story once about someone you knew. I thought it was someone you knew who was behind enemy lines in an attic of a building. And the Germans thought there was someone in the top of the building directing artillery fire, and so they went in there and to machine gun through the ceiling to try and get the person. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, I think that was, I'm not too sure who that was. I know one of my friends that I traveled with that I came, in fact, joined the first Special Service guy by the name of Bobby Holmes out of Medicine Hat. He was out in one of them houses out in our front line, and the German patrol come over and surrounded it. And he crawled up into the attic, and they blew the thing up. And he was blowed up there a little, but he didn't get hurt, but he stayed up there. And I finally got back to camp, but he was blew up at that area. Now, if they didn't blow them houses up, we did, so it was nip and tuck on that.
It sounds like you had a number of very close calls. When friends are hit on both sides of you, and a number of other examples. If you look back, did you ever have a moment when you thought, that was so close, I don't know how I survived that?
Yeah, lots of them. And I don't know why them machine gun bullets didn't hit me. Because I could see dirt being tore up all around me. Why they didn't hit me? In between my legs, they were mowing grass off over top of me. Why I didn't get, I have no idea. I'm pretty flat on the ground. He thought I was killed. Well, there was lots of times where, why wasn't you killed? Why was that machine gun would be just a foot away from you?
Who was
the other guy on the other side? There was three of us in this crew. We had this the Johnson automatic rifle, and the other two, Hagen and myself, had rifles. Hall had the automatic rifle. Now they took Hall somewhere, and he never did get back. He got killed, but they sent him with some prisoners to take down the hill or something, and that's when the artillery came in, the German artillery, and he got killed here. So my crew was gone. I had to join up from then on when I was with this other guy from California.
How many prisoners did you see or were you a part of? How many German prisoners were you a part of capturing, do you think?